Hello, my name is Susan Hirata, and I'm the Programming Director for DisOrient. I'm excited to welcome you to the 17th Annual DisOrient Asian American Film Festival of Oregon. For 17 years, DisOrient has maintained this platform to celebrate the stories and voices of Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. Today, it's my pleasure to host this conversation with one of the filmmakers of High Tide Don't Hide, Phil Stebbing. Phil is one of the producers and directors. Over the last 30 years, Phil has worked with British broadcasters, Discovery Channel, and National Geographic, specializing in presenter-led factual programs and observational documentaries. Welcome, Phil.
Hello there. Oh, video. There we go. Oh. Hello.
There, hi.
Oh, nice to meet you.
Hey, good to have you here. So you're zooming in from New Zealand, are you?
Yes, I'm all the way over here in New Zealand.
Yeah,
Aotearoa,
cool.
New Zealand. We call it Aotearoa. It's the Māori name for New Zealand. And
nice. Well, we are thrilled to have High Tide Don't Hide in our program, and we hope that it cultivates more awareness about not only climate change, but the conversation around climate change, and specifically whose voices and experiences are included in the conversation and included in the response towards a sustainable future. So I want to start off with having you tell us a little bit about the Rebel Film Collective, which is the film collective that produced this film. Tell me a little bit about the collective and maybe how you all came to this story.
Oh, first of all, thank you so much for inviting us on. We are absolutely thrilled to be part of the program at DisOrient, and apologies for my colleagues who can't come today, but we're really, really excited to be part of your film festival. So going way back, we've been working on this project for 3 years. Originally, there was just two of us, my colleague Neva, who lives in a very small town called Thames, which is part of the film. There's two young women who come from Thames. It's a very low-lying town, and it's threatened by climate change. And Neva had been following the climate activist group there. And at the same time, that was November 2018, there was a group in Britain, I don't know if you heard of it, called Extinction Rebellion. Mm-hmm. And they were basically just fed up with the fact that nothing's really moving fast enough as it should be. And they had three main demands, which I won't go into. And they decided that non-violent direct action was the only way forward. And they caused some major disruptions in London, and we were following that and we're thinking, great, they're coming to New Zealand. You know, XR groups starting up here, you know, this is something that really needs to happen. So Neva and I, we went along to XR groups and listened to adults talking, and nothing was happening. They were like talking, and then they were like, oh, we don't want you to film us, or we're going to have to talk about you filming us. And we were like, guys, we're in a climate emergency. You're a pressure group. You want people to film you, don't you? And we were like scratching our heads. We went to 3 meetings, and it didn't happen. And we were like really frustrated. And at the same time, Neva and I were thinking about a way to create a kind of a collective of filmmakers to you know, document what was going on around Aotearoa, New Zealand, in the different locations, because we couldn't do it ourselves. So we set up a Facebook group to basically allow filmmakers a place to go to share knowledge, skills, almost like a hub, and share their footage and help each other. And we called that the Rebel Film Collective. So our kind of background to this is basically I would call us an anarchist film collective. We are non-hierarchical, non-sexist, non-racist. We're self-determinist, autonomous, independent. We don't particularly want to take any funding. We try and do it completely on our own, although we do apply for things and occasionally people do support us, especially through crowdfunding. So we're kind of out there and almost in a way to kind of, I wouldn't say we're trying to counter the mainstream media, but to basically find stories that are happening on the ground and support people who are doing it. So that's how we came about. And just to go back into how the film came about, yeah, we were like, this is not happening. And Neva said, well, why don't we, there's these two girls, Helena and Lillian, they're pretty amazing. Why don't we follow them? So we just started following Helena and Lillian. And when I met them, I was just like, wow, they've got it. They're out there. You know, these are amazing people with such vision and drive and energy, and they were just amazing. And I was like, that's what, as a filmmaker, that's what you want to be able to follow and tell their story. So that's how the film kind of started.
Wow. So on that note, what I was thinking about the film, what I find so moving about the film is how you were able to capture that sincerity of the students. You were able to capture their sincerity, their anxieties, their fearlessness. What was that like to get access to them, their families, social media, all of that? Was that difficult?
Yeah, it was and it wasn't. There's two sides of it, I suppose. So personally, I've been making documentaries and films for more than 30 years. So I have been through this process of meeting people and asking them to be filmed, and knowing that I think you have to be gentle and kind and completely honest and transparent with whoever you're working with. I've worked in television a lot, and I've seen the other side where producers can be very manipulative, egoistic, and self-serving. And yeah, it causes basically trouble. And people feel let down and hurt, and you know, feel like they've been told a load of rubbish at the end of it. But anyway, so with that kind of, I've always carried that perspective whenever I work with someone. And Neva is incredibly empathetic, sympathetic, and honorable person as well, my original business colleague. And we basically just were really upfront with people, and said, look, this is what we want to do. We want to follow you. We want to really get personal with you, but not disrupt your life. But this film will disrupt your life. And, you know, we want you to be as honest and upfront as you possibly can. And that means we've got to, you know, see you in your most vulnerable place. And what we did, we said, look, we don't want to be in your house all the time, but we decided to give them video cameras that they kept, and they became theirs and they owned, and they could just record whatever happened. And we didn't really monitor those, we just encouraged them to do it. So when we started looking at the material, it was really, I don't know, it was a great feeling of that how they'd opened up to us and the trust that we'd gained with them. And I think part of that also came with the fact that we talked to their parents as well about what we wanted to do. And we gave pledges to all the parents that we would protect their children and make sure that everything was, you know, above board, and we wouldn't be asking them to do anything they didn't do. In fact, we didn't really ask them to do anything. We just kind of followed them. And then just to kind of take you to the end line, we before the film went out, we sat down with them and their parents, and they watched the film and said, is there anything there you don't like, or do you want to change anything? And in fact, we had one moment where we showed the film to a younger Philly, and her family, brothers and sisters. It was like a full massive room full of people, and and they, they did say something, that and I'll share this with you. I think it's okay. She said, look, one of her brothers said, look, there's one thing in there that makes Philly sound like the angry brown girl, and I think you should be careful with that portrayal. And we were like, we considered that, and it was just we did change one thing that was I think he was completely right. So yeah, it was a good process that we went through.
Wow, that's amazing. Really interesting. So what I wanted to tell you is that from our DisOrient lens, from our screeners lens, what specifically grabbed us about the film was Philly's presence in the film, how she had to fight for a seat at the table. She wasn't willing to be tokenized. We really, she was incredible, and we admired her, and her activism is so rooted in her culture. And I feel like that was just such a important part of the film. And I'm wondering if you stumbled upon Philly and that whole narrative of part of that film, or how did that happen? Because she wasn't, she wasn't one of the two that you started out with.
Yeah. It was a developing narrative. So yeah, we never intended to make a feature documentary. Neva and I, we just thought, we'll just follow what's going on, and this is happening now. We should just be documenting it, because it was New Zealand society in many ways is quite conformist. When you go, when they have a demonstration, it's you hardly hear anything. Just people turn up and then they walk from one place to another and hear a few speeches, and then they're gone. I don't know if you noticed, but my accent's English, and my mother's Spanish, so I've lived in both places. And when you have a demonstration, you're there to make a point. You're out there to change something that's wrong. And it's like, what the hell's going on in New Zealand? I don't like criticizing it, but let's have a bit more emotion here, as well as in the United States. It's loud.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we were following this, and basically I was like, they've got power and they've got energy, but where is the story going? And we'll just keep following them. So we're following Helena and Lillian, the two girls from Thames, and then we started following the major organizer, Sophie from Wellington, and it was going somewhere. And then Neva, I think she called me up, or she came round to the house, and she goes, have you seen this post from, I can't remember where it's from, but it's basically saying that Philly has been on a television program called The Project, and it's actually in the film, where she basically calls out the school strike for climate movement for being prejudiced, let's put it that way, at the time. And we were like, oh no, let's look at that. And it was like, that was the moment when it went on The Project that we realized that we had to follow this line. What was this about? How could this, these nice young people be prejudiced and potentially be racist? And we were like, okay, right. So I called up someone to try and get a number of the school strike for climate movement in Auckland. And he was like, when he heard about this, he was an older activist. He was like, oh, what? He was like, oh, what? How has this happened? He just knew this was like a really bad bit of almost like publicity. Took it away from the whole aspect of fighting for climate justice.
Yeah.
So he put us in contact with Luke, who's part Maori. And then we did our best to contact Philly, and we got a contact number for her. We found out that she was, we managed to meet her, and we sat down with her and we explained who we were. It's called a pipiha in New Zealand, where you say who you're from, your place, your land, and what you're about. And we showed her some pictures, and she said, "I'll think about it, come and meet my parents." And we went and met her parents, and she said yes, they said yes, and we took it on from there.
Wow. So tell us a little bit more about that. How was that interaction? And she just has such powerful, she's amazing artist, and she has such powerful things that she says in the film about not being tokenized and not being heard. She wasn't being listened to, really, even when she was saying her using her voice. She was being ignored, and admirably so concerned about her community too, and how the safety of her community in these protests. Can you tell us a little bit more about her in that time?
Yeah, it's a complicated issue, this, because New Zealand is kind of pictured as this wonderful green place where everyone gets on with each other, and Maori have a place, they've got their own party in Parliament, and there's a treaty that's been honoured, and this, that, and the other. But it's very disingenuous. I'm actually saddened by the amount of racism that I encounter here, and it's like there's a whole, the mass of society here doesn't get it. They don't get that there's been a process of systematic racism in this country, marginalization, land taken away, stolen, deceived, and so forth. And I think it's because, in my case, I'm not going to speak for the other directors here, but I came here 8 years ago from England, which is a particularly racist country anyway. And then it's New Zealand's portrayed as a meritocratic place where everyone's can move up, but that's just rubbish, really. Anyway, so Philly, she's a great spokeswoman for her community, the Pacifica community, and she does it in such a kind and gentle way without being angry and swearing, and she has every right to, because of the way her community has to take so much, pardon the expression, crap.
Mm-hmm.
They are the fruit pickers. They are the people that do the menial jobs. They've been brought in to do the jobs that Pākehā, which is the term for white people here in New Zealand, don't want to do. So yeah.
Well, I tell you, the most moving part of the film for me is at the protest at the end, where you see her community and you see the haka that they do as part of the protest. That is so powerful. Like they went there and they brought their spirit there, and you see her tearing up when she is with her community that way. And they were just, it was, I don't know, it just made me cry, really, just to see their sincerity, and how much, then you've seen before that through the film, how much they had to fight just to be there in a way. And it was beautiful.
They're not, the film shows that they're not taken seriously.
Yeah.
And more than that, they're not, the Pacifica community aren't considered. And that's the first strike. They weren't considered.
Yeah.
They weren't even ignored. It was almost like they don't exist, because the school strike for movement was particularly born out of a very kind of white, wealthy part of Auckland and other places in New Zealand. And the fact that the Pacific Islands, and New Zealand is a Pacific island, but the other Pacific Islands, which are low-lying, surrounded by sea, are more vulnerable to what's going on with the climate, wasn't considered.
Yeah.
They were thinking about what's going to happen in their future 30 years down the line when they're 40 or 50 and their children. They weren't bringing up the whole thing or putting it at the front of their concerns and their demands, that the region is going underwater, and the people in the community who are from Samoa and Tonga and so forth, and Fiji, their families on those islands, they're part of their Auckland community or whatever, are going to be drowning. They didn't get it. And no one within their movement was basically feeding that back into them.
Yeah.
And when they had the first strike, it's not so much, we weren't there, but to film it, but when they had the first strike, they did it on the same day as the Pacifica community have their festival, and they wouldn't change it.
Right.
They were asked to, but they wouldn't. They didn't see it as an issue.
Yeah.
So the Pacific community weren't there on the first day.
Yeah.
I think there was just one young woman who came, but so in some ways the film is remarkable in the sense that it's not all disheartening. From the first strike, through Philly's pushing and organizing her own separate group, manages by the third strike, as you'll see in the film, to actually get total representation and get the voices and make the point that, we are not drowning, we are fighting. Save the Pacific.
And, maybe that's really the lesson that needed to be learned. It wasn't necessarily whatever they said at the strike, but it was having to learn to reach across communities and who is involved when you're talking about climate change. It's everybody, it's humanity. And maybe that's what they gained from it, is, that understanding, that realization that we can talk about climate change, but we need to really talk about each other and really figure out how we're going to take care of each other in this whole climate change world, But I think you said that you have information or recent information about Philly, or you had a post maybe to share. Do you want to do that?
Yeah, maybe Alexandra could put it up.
Yeah.
So what's interesting about Philly is she's gone to university. 40K, the group that they organize in her area, is very quiet these days. So this poster here is from the second climate march strike. And for everybody who hasn't seen the film, Philly is wearing the kind of the yellow top with the Ignoring Climate Change is Pacific Genocide. And that's her, one of 40K's colleagues next to her, Dirty Seas, not down, Dirty South, not Dirty Seas. And this was basically, Philly was pushing this all the time, this idea, what's going on in the Pacific is genocide. And, everybody else, everyone was having like, other kind of posters about, how we should change or something. But she was like, no, it's going on now.
Good for her.
You can't ignore it. And as you see around her, there's a lot of white faces with doing their thing, but they didn't really get where it's happening now and supporting it. Anyway, so as you see in the film, even the fact that she used the word genocide caused another issue with some of the members from School Strike for Climate who didn't want her to use the word genocide.
Yeah.
It was like, by the definition, by the UN definition, what's going on in the Pacific Island is not genocide. And she said, yes, it is. Well, how do you term genocide? You know, my people are being killed by this. And, you know, she had to argue with people,
yeah,
you know, who, in many ways, they were very disrespectful for her position and what was happening, and privileged, entitled. Yeah. So I just wanted to read a little, if it's okay. Can I just read Buddy's post? Because she wrote this after pretty much a year after the the third strike finished, and then the film came out. And she wrote, I was 16 when my mates and I sat round Macca's table, McDonald's, and For the Culture was born. If you had told us then, only a few years later, there'd be a documentary about what we're about to do, that we'd get to bring it back to the hood and have taught it in schools around Aotearoa, which is New Zealand, none of us would have believed you. We were young, ambitious, unapologetically brown and proud kids who didn't realize that while we were fighting for our islands, we had to fight the racism from within the climate space itself. The doco captures that, but it doesn't capture the way we hustle just to be seen. I'll always have the softest space in my heart for this time in my life, in between people not taking us seriously when we spoke up, finding ways to get things done when we had no money, even our own people thinking for the culture was a gang. It wasn't easy, but I'd do it again and again because our islands, our heritage, and our people are worth it. So here's to disrupting, decolonizing, and diversifying spaces we're often left out of. Raise fist. This doco only scratches the surface of how much more needs to be done, but I'm grateful our Pacifica youth can see themselves represented in it, and it holds up a mirror to those making decisions in the climate space. It reaffirms what we know is true. Climate justice is Indigenous justice. To come through to Mangere Arts Centre on August the 12th to see the film.
Yeah, she's so eloquent and intelligent and amazing. Yeah.
I feel so illiterate when I read her stuff and hear her speak. So amazing. I love her so much.
Yeah. And you, so the film ends and they have this great march, and I think you said you have information too about the Auckland School Strike for Climate. Do you want to share that?
Yeah. So I know I haven't got much time. It's a big subject, but essentially,
quickly, and maybe we can post something about it later too.
Yeah, in the background, there was more discussions going with Auckland School Strike, and it seems that it got to them and they decided to disband without any consultation or discussion with Pacific Climate Warriors, for example, or 40K or anybody. They just said, hands up, we can't deal with this, we've had enough. And they just closed down and said, you know, we'll hand it over to you now. You know better than us. We'll leave you to take on the fight. And, you know, it just shows that we're all in this together. We need allyship. We need to talk about it. We need to have difficult conversations.
Yeah.
You know, there is no shame in doing things if you're going to make amends and move on. Yeah. But they just said, no, we made a mistake. Okay, we'll admit to being racist, but you know, it's yours now. Yeah. I mean, that's a slap in the face to anybody, and racist in itself. I mean, I don't know.
It's a privilege anyway.
I hope our film in some ways can further conversation and heal certain things and be useful for other groups when they've got difficult situations like this in the future.
Yeah. Wow. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much. We are running out of time, but thank you so much for the film, for the work that all of you do with such big hearts and humanity. I really appreciate it. And we love having you part of our festival this year.
Oh, thanks. So, wish we could be there. Good luck.
Yes, and give our well wishes to all the youth and the rest of the filmmakers.
Thank you, Susan.
Yeah,
Lovely to
yeah,
meet you.
yeah. Thank you.